one of the things we are focused on is remaining an enduring company. My mission and the company's mission is really to be able to grow and make Interstates stronger and have a lot of vitality and be able to pass it to the next generation. And they can pass it along to the next generation.
Is leadership a series of sprints, or is it a marathon? Maybe it's not either. Maybe it's actually a lifelong commitment that requires us to always be investing. I'm your host, Tim Spiker, and this is the Be Worth Following podcast, a production of the People Forward Network. On this show, we talk with exceptional leaders, thinkers, and researchers about what actually drives effective leadership across the globe and over time. You just heard from Scott Peterson, CEO of Interstates, an award-winning industrial construction company. For over 60 years, Interstates has built industrial construction projects for facilities in the production of consumer goods, the energy and chemical industries, warehousing, food and beverage production, and in more recent years, data centers. Interstates has a unique skill set in the construction of industrial facilities, and in the last 4 years alone, Interstates has picked up 12 awards of note, including the Top Performer Award from the Associated Builders and Contractors, one of the top construction associations in the United States. They also won the Top System Integrator Giant Award for their stellar work in control systems and engineering. And they've done it all while racking up safety awards along the way. Despite all the accolades for safely building great projects, Interstates believes the most impressive thing they've ever built is their team. And ladies and gentlemen, that has not happened by accident. It has happened through a long-term commitment and intention to develop their people, their culture, and their leaders. In my conversation with Scott, we go deep. We talk about vulnerability, being inwardly sound, and how those qualities enable Interstates leaders to lead with the heart of a servant. As for Scott, his commitments to causes bigger than himself started at a very young age, and that is where we begin.
There's a lot of people that have impact with me over the years. I think if you go back to grade school around that time frame, I was in Boy Scouts. I had several really good friends. I was in a lot of activities. There was always probably desire to, the people I hung around with wanted to pursue, high performance and giving back and serving. And so the Boy Scouts fit a lot into that. I spent a lot of time on that. We had a good group of people, and we had a lot of Eagle Scouts that came out of that group. My dad was a pastor, and he was a quiet leader, did an amazing job of connecting with people and having empathy with people and influencing them. My mom was my second grade school teacher, so it was like parent-teacher conferences every day. She was great. She was firm, but very adamant to help you reach your potential and learn and grow. And one of my most impactful, probably favorite professor from University of South Dakota was Steve Ward. And he was a history prof, which might seem odd, but when I got to know him and we would talk offline quite a bit, and then he asked me one day to say, what do you think my main job is? And I tried to answer that question and probably didn't do a very good job of it. He goes, well, my main job is to teach you how to think. If I can teach you how to think, you can do anything. So it's not just regurgitating. It's not just trying to come up with the right answers, but you have to think critically and come up with different ways to solve problems. And if I can teach you that, then I've done my job. And that's how he taught. I mean, I never knew what the questions would be. He never talked about them, but he made you put different stuff together and really pushed to teach his students how to think. And that was very impactful for me. And, a lot of people just investing in me. I've been very blessed over my years. And then we had a lot of great leaders at Interstates too, that we tried different things. We thought, how can we be better? How can we serve our clients better? How can we develop more leaders? How can we do a lot of things better? So there's always that pursuit of making sure you're trying to reach your potential. And how are you getting better every single day?
I want to go back to the Eagle Scout thing for just a second. Can you walk us through a little bit what that path was like for you as a young man? Because I know it's quite an accomplishment to complete the Eagle Scouts. And there aren't usually, you said there were a number of you. So share a little bit with everybody about how that works and, kind of a little more detail on how it impacted you.
It probably takes anywhere from like 5 to 8 years. You have to learn different things, experiment in different things. You have to be fairly well-rounded from that side of it. You get leadership opportunities. You have to do things you've never done before. And
Mm.
in that journey, the final project is you have to lead a project that makes a difference in community or serve someone else. It's got to be beyond that. So you're responsible for planning and executing, getting the team around it. A lot of it is not you just doing something. So you're all very dependent on the team showing up and supporting you.
Do you remember what your project was?
Yeah, it's a vial of life. I started Scouts probably in the 70s, and I did this in the very early in the 80s. So no internet, no nothing. So I went around to my small town, but it was a vial that you were supposed to keep in your refrigerator, and then you'd have a sticker on the door and on the refrigerator. And then if the ambulance ever came, they know if they see the sticker to go grab this vial that has all your medical information. So it's supposed to help with their response. It's like electronic medical records before they were invented from that side of it. So it's to help people be in a situation where they set up the ambulance or EMT for to help the people that they're responding to
Wow.
better and quicker from that side of it. So we had to explain it, cover the community, and then get funding for it or get things donated to it. And only I think 2 to 3% of Scouts become Eagle Scouts, and we probably had in the time I was there, we probably had 6 to 7 in a group of probably 20 or probably 25. But it was a little bit of lessons of who you hang out with helps you
Mm.
grow, or they might not help you. So if you're hanging around great people, you're going to become better.
You got a chance to hang around a lot of people who were willing to do hard work to do something really special, and that encourages everybody.
Very much so. If you hang around great people, you're going to do great things and you're going to have a bigger impact. That's sometimes forgotten about.
Yeah, there's a thing there in terms of being able to be in relationship with really anybody in a positive way is different than who are those super influential people? Who are the people that I'm invested in? Who are the people that I listen to real hard, even as peers? Who are you going to take your cues from? And I think about that. Think about the position you're in now. Think about the position of influence. And that would be true for all of life, I think. But I especially think about the younger people coming into the workforce that you have the responsibility organizationally to lead. And who is it as they enter the doors of Interstates for maybe their first job out of college? Who are those invisible people that you don't see that are the influences around them? Obviously not something you can control, but it's interesting to think about the influences that walk in the door when you're leading an organization such as you are.
Yeah, it's a wide variety. Over the years, it can be people that you started with. It could be the people that you do a project with. It's people that you're coaching, people that are coaching you, mentors that are outside the organization too. Like right now, I'm purposely trying to mentor 2 or 3 people outside of work just so I have a little bit of breadth of outside of Interstates so it doesn't become so mono-focused from that side of it.
How did you get started on that? Because I'm just thinking about all of the senior leaders that are listening, and they're like, wow, I don't have enough oxygen just to take care of myself and the organization. And Scott's reaching outside of the organization. So how did you come to do that?
A lot of it is opportunistic. One of the things I've wanted to do for a while is have and it goes back to my mission statement too, but have a positive impact on different groups. And one of the groups I think I think I can help with is like females in business. So what I've been looking for is someone that approaches me, and most of the time they ask, but I build a relationship. I started investing a little bit in them, and then sometimes they formally or informally ask if I'd mentor them. And I said, sure, that's great, because when I'm doing that, I'm learning as much. So normally there could be different generations, different genders from that side of it. So there's a lot of perspective that I can gain by mentoring someone else. It's just not all one way. So I get a lot of benefit from it indirectly, and they get hopefully benefit too through asking questions, processing different issues, looking at it from a wide range of things. I'll share my mistakes. I'll share the things that go good and things I'm working on now too.
What is it about female leaders that, as a senior male leader, and you look at that demographic, what is it about that particularly got your attention as a place that you wanted to contribute to and invest?
You know, family members, sisters and daughters, and just looking at it, I've had some really great leaders that I reported up to that were female, and they did a great job. And I think in a lot of society and in business, they have different challenges, and it's one of our opportunities or responsibilities is to figure out how we can leverage everyone, no matter what, you know, where they come from, race, creed, or whatever, that how can we help that individual reach their potential? So part of it is I think it will make Interstates better if we do that. It will make me better. And I think but there's so much talent out there, is that how can we leverage that talent and how can we help them reach their potential and how can they make an impact in their world and hopefully within the world of Interstates also.
Yeah. Well, and admirable, even as you talk about interstates, you're talking about, in some cases, making these investments outside the walls of interstate, just with female leaders in the community. There's a broader giving perspective that goes into something like that.
Well, yeah, you never know how it's, if you can help you gotta be wise about where you're investing and that you don't have unlimited time and unlimited resources, but you also know that uh, I've been blessed and I've been very fortunate in a lot of different things, and I'd like to have pass that along too at some level.
As you say that, it makes me think about the word freedom. And the reason that comes to mind is because, one of the things that the research shows is the value that is created when we're about other folks, not just about ourselves. And what does that do to an organization? And I think about it in my own life as a business person. You can get caught up in okay, what's strategically the right thing to do? How do we play this next client opportunity? How do we make sure that our next proposal is exactly right? Nothing wrong with any of that stuff. But I would say on average, the most freedom that I experience is when I'm just giving for the sake of giving. Like, I'm going to show up. This is not a charged coaching call. Somebody asked for some help. And if I take out of my mind and out of my heart, like, nothing is to be gained here, even if there is. It's not what it's about. I'm just thinking back on how fun it is.
Oh yeah.
To invest when you've set aside, like, this is not about me. By the way, for those that are listening, if you've telling yourself all the time you have to be strategic, okay, yes. But can you find some spots where you're just giving and there's literally nothing in it for you? I bet that you will experience a real fulfillment in that. Is that been true of your experience as well?
It's not always the end result, but it's the journey that you go through from that. And you got to trust the process, and good things will happen, not necessarily on your timing, but when you take time and just give of yourself, you end up being a better person. And that's the secondary benefit. And the primary benefit is you're actually helping someone. The secondary benefit, for me, I get energy, I get ideas, I just become more well-rounded. There's so many indirect benefits to myself. I almost feel bad because that's not the real reason why I do it. Sometimes I do well, and sometimes I'm struggling, but that's part of life. And you're not always going to you don't know the impact you can have on others in the moment. A lot of times you just have to invest and see where they go. You got to trust the process. And if you really do it for the right reasons, which is you're trying to help, you just never know what the good stuff's going to happen for you or for them.
Yeah. Well, speaking of good stuff, I have observed some good stuff from you and from Interstates over the years. And one of the things that I have just admired so much is the intentionality and the systematic way that Interstates goes about developing the leaders within it. There's just no way to come in the doors there. From my perspective, you're not going to escape without some level of leadership development finding you along the way. So I'm curious, how did you get to that mentality? How did the organization move towards this very intentional, very systematic perspective on the development of leaders?
So analogy is, when there's a singer that had their massive breakthrough, everybody said, "Hey, you're an overnight success." And they said, "Well, I've been doing this for 15 years and I'm just getting recognized now."
Yes.
Part of it is just the commitment and seeing where it can make it a difference and experimenting. So we started way back in the 90s. Jim Franken was the CEO at the time, and he knew we had to get into leadership. So we did 21 Laws of Leadership from Maxwell, and we walked 60 people through that over 21 weeks. And it was not elegant, but it was effective from that side of it. And so we read the book and we taught others about it, and then we tried to apply it, and then we learned. And then you think about it from a different perspective, as saying that helps the individual and it might help the team a little bit, but organizationally, you have to figure out how to put anchors or systems in place that reinforce it on a consistent basis. If everything is an event, it's really hard to have that consistent momentum. So how can you create systems and triggers that are automatic and be part of the culture that reinforce it on an ongoing basis? And if you can do that, that makes life a lot easier. Like one of our anchor programs is Excellence in Leadership, or EIL. And when we started it, it was a little bit of a struggle to get people to sign up for it. And we had to kind of recruit. Now we have a waiting list of 80 to 100 people do it. And it would
Wow.
be nice to
Wow.
do it more often. But part of it is life's not a sprint. Sometimes you have to go faster, sometimes you have to go slower, but you have to ebb and flow with the need. But if there's always that opportunity for people, and when they come in, some people go through quicker than others just based on timing. But if you can integrate it into a systems thinking approach, it makes the life a lot easier. And then it's also the mindset. The mindset is that everybody can lead. You can lead yourself, you can lead a team, you can lead an organization. Some are going to be better at other things than others, and that's okay. Everyone is valuable, and everybody can make a difference. And if we give everyone a basic tool, then we can start building a culture that reinforces that. And we want to have something that reinforces leadership, but also servant leadership, not just leadership, but servant leadership, and making sure that reinforces part of our culture. It empowers people. They're ridiculously in charge of how they lead, no matter what. Even if they don't get along with their current leader, they can still lead the way they want to lead. There's nothing stopping them but themselves. Now, sometimes it doesn't go as well as you want, or you don't think you have as much freedom, but a lot of that's mindset. But if I'm going to lead the same way, no matter what, it makes life a lot easier. You're not having to make all these micro decisions. You've made a macro decision.
Yes. Has there been a point along the way where the organization they're making investments of time, energy, and money in developing leaders? Was there a time when people weren't just automatically, yeah, we should spend this time, energy, and money?
Yeah, that doesn't usually happen. So sometimes you have to be a little bit stubborn. Sometimes you have to have a little bit of grit. I remember one conversation that Eric Hoekstra at the time and I were trying to promote this idea, and we bounced it off several different leaders for feedback. And I remember one leader saying, "Well, that's stupid. Why would you ever do that? We'll never do it as well," and all that kind of stuff. "I don't think you'd do it. It's a waste of time." And then afterwards, Eric and I were processing it, and Eric asked, "So what do you think we should? I guess we shouldn't do this." And I said, "No, I think we just do it anyway and see what happens. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We can't stop it. This is a way to build leaders and build our culture." And then we learned some stuff. We messed up. We learned some more. We started refining it, but we started doing. And that's the thing is and we didn't teach it then because it was not as common knowledge, but vulnerability and courage go hand in hand. And you got to be vulnerable, saying what you want to do, how do you want to position it, and have courage to do it. And then vulnerability still asks for feedback and still have courage to keep moving forward. If you're getting delta feedback, it's easy to shut down and stop. And then you're not going to get any delta feedback. But it's not the right thing to do. You have to keep moving forward. You have to figure out what your mission is, what you're trying to really accomplish, and then keep adapting from there. And that's one of the things we're hoping that is part of our culture, and that we want to keep reinforcing, is that we don't expect people to be perfect. A lot of it is good, timely decisions. And then if it's wrong, and we'll move forward from there.
You mentioned vulnerability. And one of the things that I have seen is that it can be challenging to be humble and challenging to be vulnerable when we've not settled some of the core questions that live within us about value and about who we are and what's the piece of the puzzle that I bring to the table. And in, in our vernacular that we use with clients, we talk about being secure and settled, essentially thinking about that being the opposite of being insecure. Talk a little bit about how you see the issue of being secure and settled showing up in leadership, and how you're hoping that leaders within Interstates will show up around the idea of being secure and settled.
I think in everybody's career, you go through the high school and college or some version of that, and you get rewarded for performance. So a lot of your validation comes externally. That means if you get good feedback, you're very secure. If you don't get good feedback, you're very insecure. And it's just a roller coaster from that side of it. And as a leader, as a person, you respond very differently to the same situation if you're secure and settled versus insecure. So one of the hopes is with the personal mission statement or a why statement, if they know their value, if they know what makes them special, and if they're okay being vulnerable to talk about their weaknesses, that's going to give them a center that it's almost like an athletic stance. That's when you have your most balanced. That's when you're most ready to move. You're most prepared to respond to any kind of situation from that side of it. My wish would be if everyone could really have that validation being within and not being given to an external source. That's going to make people feel more open, more productive, more impactful. It's just such a better place to start from that side of it. And if, as a leader, if you bring your baggage into a situation, that really hurts that situation. You can still have a positive impact, but you make it so much harder. It's like running in mud. So if you can run downhill, if you can run on dry land instead of mud, I view that if you're insecure, you're running in mud and everything becomes so much harder. And you don't get the success that you could do based on the effort you're doing. And it's so much more fulfilling that you can actually work on the problem, not on yourself. So let's work the problem. Let's not worry about blame. Let's just figure out the situation, but let's move forward from that. What can we learn? You'll learn more. You'll be more responsive. You'll solve problems way quicker. You'll be such a better teammate or a leader if you can do that. And I think there's that, it's almost like almost like a euphoria when you can be in that headspace that you're secure, saying, it's okay, whatever the situation it is, be calm, confident, and work the problem, and things are going to be okay.
That insecurity and unsettledness is just, it's insidious. If I could go out and strangle it, if I could find it, I would just eliminate it. But everything becomes so much more complicated when insecurity shows up.
I'll quote Aristotle: "The greatest victory is a victory over self." And if we can have that victory where our validation comes from within and our value comes from that, and we may fail, but that doesn't discount us as a person. That doesn't discount the value I bring. It's just an opportunity to learn and adapt. And if we can accept that would be one of the things that we don't excel at Interstates yet. And I think that's one of the things that, in the next few years is getting that mindset of growth mindset and that settled and secure, and really talking about that so we can free up our talent to really make the biggest impact as possible.
That's a good word right there, my friend. I mean, it is, it unleashes, it opens up things versus the insecurity and frankly the defensiveness that usually comes along with insecurity. And now we can't get anywhere because there's this, there's an 8-foot wide wall of defensiveness and pushback because we can't really talk about the thing we need to talk about. So I'm with you 1,000,000%, because I think about the times when I've run into that in my own career, and probably there are other people who could say, yeah, I remember that when you were the insecure one, Tim, and that put a pit in their stomach. So I've done it, but man, I've been on the other side of it and I hate it.
Yeah, I'm much better now than I was, 2 years ago, 20 years ago. And I hope I'll be much better in 2 years from now than I am right now. It's a constant battle. And I think if we can go from 50% winning of that or 20% up to 80%, 90%, we'll never be 100%. And that's okay. If we can add 10% a year of that being more settled and secure, I think we'll have a way bigger impact than you can imagine.
Well, and I love the way you put it. Then we get to stay focused on the problem. What's the job to be done? What's the problem that we are trying to solve for? Respectfully, it's not the leader's insecurity. We need to solve for that so that we can get to the actual problem, but we got to get through that barrier to really be able to focus on the organizational issues that we're trying to solve. Talk to us a little bit about some of the consistent leadership messages. You have this intentionality, you have a systematic approach to it, but then you have a few key ideas around leadership that you are really trying to hit on again and again and again with people. So, servant leadership being one. Let's talk about that a little bit. And what are some other ones, perhaps?
I think part of it is, you can frame leadership 100 different ways. And the key is whatever your organization needs is be consistent. It doesn't have to be a perfect way to describe it, but you have to have something that's consistent to help people navigate how to do it well, how to learn it and how to explain it, and then actually how to do it. Setting direction is a big deal for us, making sure that we know what the direction is, making sure that we're looking at it from taking care of our people side of it. Are you explaining the why behind what we're doing? That reinforces how important that work is. People want to make a difference and they want to do important work. And if you do the what and the why, like with mission clarity coming from extreme ownership, that makes a huge difference from that side of it. We want people to find their sweet spot. So a lot of it is helping people understand their strengths and weaknesses, but in a context of what you're great at, what do you love to do, and what does the organization or team need from you? If you can find that sweet spot, and that will make a huge difference for yourself from an engagement standpoint, from an energy standpoint, but it also helps the team the best they can. And then invest in yourself. What skills do you want to learn? What kind of strengths can you get better at? Improving your strengths is where you're going to become a superstar. And a lot of times people think that they have to mitigate their weaknesses is how they become a superstar. And it's important to get weaknesses up to be aware of it, number one. Get it up to a minimum standard is number two. But then lean on your team members to take care of those things. And then you got to be vulnerable and to say, you're better at this. Go ahead and do that. Even though I have potentially more years of experience or at a different level, but someone else can most likely do a better job if it's related to your weaknesses. And then having purpose and making sure people understand their why. Why do they come to work? What is their personal mission statement? What are they passionate about? The more they know themselves, the better off they're going to be as a person, as a leader, as a family member. A lot of times what we do is encourage people to lead at Interstates, whether themselves or their teams, but also do it outside the organization, whether it's for a not-for-profit or within the community somehow. I've heard we have a reputation of when we get involved, we get things done and we help organize and lead. And that's a great compliment to our team members because they're the ones doing it.
Around the idea of being intentional in developing leaders in these systems that we've been talking about, there's this idea of a framework, a perspective, if you will, of how you look at leadership. Paint for us a picture about what that framework looks like at Interstates.
One of the things we do is look at what the organization needs from a leadership standpoint. So everything we do, whether it's at the entry level to senior leader development, is personal leadership, team leadership, and organizational leadership. And there's a lot of overlap between all of them. However, it allows people to plug into where they are at that moment. A newer leader or someone that's not even leading anything right now, they could focus more on personal leadership of how can I lead myself better? How can I be more intentional? How can I set direction for myself? How can I make a bigger impact from that? It's going to help them get traction in their career and feel like they're winning and making a difference from that. People that are leading a team, they have to lead themselves and they have to lead the team. So what does that team need? How do I create that team? How do I get focused on that team? How can I learn from that team and adapt and making sure that I can meet that team where they're at and help them be successful, setting that team up for success. And then at the organizational level, you have to look at it from a system standpoint. What are the reinforcing systems that you need to make sure that you're developing people, there's continuity between teams of setting direction, and what other leadership aspects you want to do. But where does the organization need for quantity and quality of leaders in the future from that side of it? Are we really weak in one area that we have to grow that leadership expertise in? Just because you're a good leader in one situation does not make you a good leader in a different situation. It's all contextual at some level. Some of it can be moved over to a different situation, but I think that's where people get in the trouble, is that you can become arrogant and think you can lead in any kind of situation. And you got to stay humble or you're going to get humbled. And even if you try to do that, you're going to get humbled. And humbling is just a signal that's saying, hey, take a step back, reset, learn, and then re-engage. And I think that's really important for us to make sure that as we're going through this, you got to be humble, that you're not going to be the end all be all. You're not going to be the best leader in the world. Might not even be the best leader in that situation. But what does the team need? What does the organization need? What do I need? If we can be humble enough to ask and accept help, and that's hard. I mean, that's one thing I'm still working on. And I think that's one thing the organization is still working on, is how can we help each other? We love to help. It's hard to accept help. But that's probably one of the best ways for us to show humility and that we care, because we're allowing someone else to help us, which is super, super hard, awkward, vulnerable, you name it, it's that. But I think that's one of the key things that we're going to be working on in the next several years, is how can we do that? Because that's going to set up the organization and set up all these team members for more success in the future if we can get better at that.
So when you say, how can we do that, that is receiving help?
Yep. Asking and receiving help. It's tough to do. And being transparent. I mean, I struggle with that. I'm maybe the poster child for that. I don't know, but I'm at least up there. In your book, one of the things that really struck me is that the leaders have to extend trust first. If the leaders don't extend trust first, why should the team extend trust at all? We set the tone, we set the example. And I think the same is for vulnerability and humility. If we're not going to go first, why would we expect anybody else to do it? So if we can't accept help, we shouldn't expect anybody else to do help or ask for help or accept help. So I think it's our responsibility as leaders to set the tone and be very purposeful about it. And it's not fun. I'd much rather talk about other things than what I suck at, but that list is long and full of great stories, I'm sure, at least from one perspective. The more you talk about your weaknesses and your struggles, the easier it becomes. So a lot of it's building that muscle or that callus that through activity, through repetition, that it becomes easier. And that's the hope. It's not fun in the beginning, probably won't be fun at the end, but it will be hopefully a lot easier, 3 months from now or 3 years from now than it is right now. But if we never talk about it, it will always be hard. And one of the things I've said to a lot of people, and I try to remind myself, is whether it's a mistake, whether it's a challenge, whether it's a struggle, if you talk about it, just think of all those things as a storm. If you talk about the storm, you own the storm. If you don't talk about the storm owns you. So what are you going to do? Are you going to be passive and let that storm, that challenge, that weakness, that situation own you? Or are you going to talk about it and take ownership of that? It may not be fun, but I'd rather have it tough and take ownership of that storm than the other way around, because that means you're paying for it every day, every week, every month, every year, forever, versus just dealing with it and be able to learn and be able to move on.
Yeah, well, I think Dr. Cloud and Jocko would both be very happy with what you just said there. I think to be online in terms of how all of that works together, how that ownership piece comes in, and how as leaders we can take that responsibility as opposed to, being the victim and letting something own us. I love it. It's really good. It's really good. You mentioned the word mindset earlier, and you also mentioned the term ridiculously in charge. So let's talk about that a little bit. It's a term that may be familiar to a number of people who are listening, but for those that it might be new, Let's talk about what it means and for Interstates where that comes from.
So it started a while ago from Dr. Henry Cloud and one of his books. I just love that concept because a lot of times we put constraints on ourselves just because of assumptions. And if you have a mindset that I'm ridiculously in charge of my decisions, no matter what, how I lead, no matter what, that means I take full ownership of the performance of myself and my team. Now, sometimes that's awesome. Sometimes that's not fun to look at. But if things are going sideways, you have to look at yourself or look in the mirror first, because what am I doing? What kind of system have I created that's created this problem? Or what solution did I do 5 years ago that has created this problem in front of us? And we'll never come up with a perfect solution or a perfect situation in the world. We have to keep moving forward and do the best we can. And if we can do that, then we're really going to we'll win in the long run, as long as we're reflective and we learn and have that growth mindset of, we may not have it figured out yet. And if we do that, that means that we will figure it out. It might take us a couple iterations, but we will get it done. We will figure it out. We will take care of our team. We will take care of our clients. And that's motivating and confident, and not pressure where we're trying to get it right. And we still do that. I mean, we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. We can whine and complain with the best of them, I'm sure, but we don't stay there. And that's the important part of it.
Yeah. Well, Carol Dweck would be so happy to hear you use the word yet, just the way you did there a moment ago. And it's interesting because I recognize that as a parent. I think about how much we try to instill this. If one of my kids is going to tell me they can't do something, I'm not going to ask them and lie to say that they can, but let's add the word yet. And yet, as I hear you say that, I think, gosh, that really doesn't stop when we exit childhood. It's really that perspective that we should have throughout the whole of our careers. And I'm hearing you say that as a piece of the culture of Interstates as well.
Yeah. The one thing about culture is that you always have to work on it. And I believe we have an awesome culture. I mean, I love our culture. We added our core values back in 1996. We added our vision in 2005. We added the why statements in 2012 after Simon Sinek's video. It kind of motivated us to do that. And that was a really fun one, because that was the tipping point where the culture became owned by the employees, not by the leaders. Before that, it was the leaders really reminding everything of the core values or the vision and all that. But once we did the why statements, our team members really, I hear them talking more about it than I am talking about it. And that's awesome. We grow to provide opportunities for our people. So we're investing in people. We're trying to give them new opportunities. We're giving them training. We're giving them development opportunities. They can rotate into different teams and get different experiences. Maybe they find even a better sweet spot that they love. So all those things can happen when the culture is owned by everyone, not just by one person or one group.
This is really interesting because when I think about the intentionality that you and Interstates have had for a very long time, and yet you identify a tipping point in owning the culture connected to the idea of these why statements. So let's talk just a little bit more about that, because I think it's worth us trying to understand why, pardon the pun, why that created a tipping point for the organization. Because it's not like you started being intentional at that point. You had been intentional around culture and leader development for some time. But something about that move pushed things from being at the top of the organization to being held by the whole organization. So what do you attribute that to as you went through the process of clarifying the whys?
A lot of it gave people an opportunity to articulate what they were passionate about and what they really cared about, and it really captured the essence of Interstates. We just didn't articulate it well or purposely from that. And it's really about the passion and the commitment that our people feel for each other and for the organization. Out of the 3 why statements, one is providing opportunities for our people.
So we're growing in order to provide those opportunities.
Yeah, it's not the only way to provide opportunities, but it's one of the best ways to grow that.
So take that one as an example, because one of the things, it's like we can be here and we can record a conversation and here are the concepts, but like boots on the ground, kind of real tangible examples. When you think about, Okay, so we author the why statement that we're going to grow because of the opportunities that it provides. And then what happened as people began to own that more? Talk to us a little bit about kind of the tangible impact that you began to see over time after you got real clear on that why.
So over the years, we have a field crew and they have electricians, journeymen, foremen, and superintendents. And the superintendents have the most experience and most influence and run the site. To hear superintendents saying, hey, look at those other superintendents. I did that. I helped them become
Oh,
superintendents.
wow.
And to hear those
Wow.
superintendents, not even in the same room, months apart, saying, yeah, that one superintendent took me under their wing and really taught me and helped me become better. And like the first superintendent says, I helped them become superintendents and I see them as peers now. And that doesn't happen very often from that side,
No,
especially
no.
where it's a lot of pressure and all that. Let's just get her done and move on. Let's get her done and move on. But that and that's just a sampling. There's people that are saying, my job is to help you be more successful. Where do you want to go? Let me help you get there. That's where the caring and the love for each other really plays into it. Is you can't convince people of that. You can attract and encourage and nurture that, but that's coming from them, and that's powerful stuff.
I just think about all the times when organizations do talk about growth and people are really struggling sometimes. They're like, wait, why are we trying to grow? Is this just so, the owner can go buy a third house on one of the coasts? Is that why we're doing this? And so to be able to come back to say, no, we have to grow so that we can continue to provide new opportunities for the people that are coming up through the organization. It's a lot more compelling, especially if you've experienced that yourself. I'll work really hard and push into growth for the sake of, hey, it's going to have a big impact of opportunity for people around here. It sounds more compelling to me.
And like you said, we try to be very intentional. So like for us, well, one of the things we are focused on is remaining an enduring company. My mission and the company's mission is really to be able to grow and make Interstates stronger and have a lot of vitality and be able to pass it to the next generation. And they can pass it along to the next generation. In today's world, a lot of companies get bought and sold. And I think that's okay. And it fits their world, it fits what their aspirations are. For ours, we really want Interstates to be around for a long time because I think our culture is so special that I want more and more people to experience it. And my job is to make it a little bit better during my tenure. And I think a lot of people have that exact same mentality is how can we set up the next generation so they can even do a better job of making Interstate stronger, making the culture stronger, to have a bigger impact with our clients and our communities.
One of our clients, and I'll spare him personal identification, but if he hears this, he'll know who he is. He said that his personal mission is to leave the woodpile a little higher. And I think, when I hear you saying that, I think of, yeah, I don't have to conquer the world, but I do want to leave this better than it was when I came upon it.
That's awesome. I mean, for that person to have that kind of focus and know what a win is. And I was pretty lucky and blessed to come up with my mission statement way back in 1996. I went to a Stephen Covey one, First Things First, and they made you do that. It took me 3 months, and it wasn't necessarily great, but acid tested several times over the last few decades. But like mine is with God's help and guidance, have a positive impact on people and organizations that are important to me. Interstates is important to me. How can I have a positive impact? And it's that simple, but it helps you make decisions. Is this positively impacting them in the long and short run? And what does that look like tomorrow? And what does it look like 5 years from now?
When you talk about clarity of personal purpose, one of the things that we get in dialogue with our clients on this particular subject, and we're working with about 50 leaders on this right now, so it feels very front of mind, very apropos, which is two huge things that we get and the people around us get as leaders when we're clear on our personal purpose. And I have this conversation with people from time to time. It's like, well, it's not about the company, it's not about the organization. What does it have to do with being a more effective leader? And I think it's a really good question to ask. My response to that is, as a leader, when I'm clear on what my personal purpose is, it puts energy in my tank. When we've got to get up and go through the tough mud of whatever it is that's going on right now, to have a bigger purpose that I'm after really puts energy in my tank. But for me and for the people around me, I find that the clarity that you invested in getting to those number of years and now have been working to live out, that it also provides stability. And you talked about easier on decision making, to be really clear about what you're up to and why you're here and why you're taking breath and what you're going to fight for. The stability that lands in a leader who has done that work. And so that's stable for you, but it is also stable for the people around you. And so I love that you're talking about your own personal work that you've done on clarifying purpose, but I caught it earlier as well. You're talking about, hey, leaders at Interstates, get clear about your personal purpose. And so I love the idea of the energy it provides the leader and the stability to be able to kind of weather those storms and make hard decisions in hard moments. Is from a stability standpoint, is how does that connect in with the path that you've been on as you've clarified that those number of years ago?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stability. For me, it's almost a freeing thing that I don't have to worry about as much stuff. I know this is what I'm focused on. I don't have to. It's easier to say no to certain things, even though I probably say yes to too many things. The things I'm saying yes on, I'm excited about. I know if I do something that doesn't really fit that niche, if I get asked to be on a not-for-profit, but it's more of I can't see myself making a difference. I have to say no, otherwise it's gonna be draining for me. So from a freedom standpoint, I hope it helps me relax more. It helps me more focus, and it provides more energy on the things that I can truly make a difference on. And if I can do that, energy builds energy, and it really helps me be excited about life.
There are so many things that Scott referenced and said along the way during our dialogue that would be valuable to hold on to. At the same time, there's an overarching idea and message that I want to make sure that we don't miss. And that is the long arc of leadership development and the long arc of culture development. As we talked through the very intentional and systematic things that Scott and the team at Interstates have been doing in the past and continue to do in terms of their development of leaders and culture, you just hear a consistency in it. We're going to do it. They're playing the long game. They're looking at things not just from a here and now. And I know for many of us that have challenges as leaders, that's a tough thing to hear because you've got the pressure of certain numbers. And in some cases, for many of you, it's every 90 days. I've got to produce. And it becomes a huge challenge to keep a view on the long arc of the development of the leaders around you and the long arc of your own development as a leader. And yet here's the thing that I have to say about that. The great ones still keep investing in the long term, even though the short term is clamoring to take over. It's that idea that, comes from Edward Deming, this idea of how do we reserve time to invest in what is not urgent but important. And nearly everything that falls under the cultural or leadership development banner falls into that category of important but not urgent. And if we let as the phrase goes, let the tyranny of the urgent, if that always rules everything, then we'll wake up 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now, and we won't be nearly where we could have been, either individually or as an organization, if we let the short term always win, always dominate, always take the first chair. So as we wrap up, the question I want to leave you with is this. Are you, as a leader, on a regular and consistent basis, prioritizing what is important but not urgent, especially when it comes to the development of culture and leaders? This is Tim Spiker, reminding you to be worth following and to follow us wherever you receive your podcasts. If you've heard something valuable today, please share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. And if you're up for it, leave us a 5-star review. Thanks for listening.